Hello everyone. This is the third of my 4 planned videos on the topic of universal basic income I started a couple of months ago. To remind those watching, the 4 foundational principles of UBI are on the screen. If you want to go back and get more definition on these, the first 2 videos I did can be found on my YouTube channel, GTGrad88. Today I want to spend just a little time on the concepts of universality and modality. In theory, the universality concept of UBI implies it's open to everyone, regardless of income level, with no conditions. What I found very interesting when I began researching the literature on UBI is that it's a United States case study that is held up as the poster child of how UBI can work. Yep, you heard me right, the good old US of A. Because you see, apparently Alaska has been paying its residents a yearly stipend of $1,800 unconditionally and regardless of other income for about the past 3 decades. Alaska uses revenue that is generated from the sale of oil, and approximately 30 years ago it was decided that all residents should share in the profit from what is, after all, a state resource. Iran, which is also using proceeds from the sale of its oil, recently established a small stipend for its residents as well, though it was really only to offset an increase in gas prices instituted domestically by its own government. Universality is one of those foundational principles of UBI that is hotly debated in literature. Are we talking about all residents, or are we talking about just citizens? If it's the former, then a generous basic income for anyone residing in the country without being citizens of said country could potentially bankrupt the system. In order to dissuade complete free riding, some have even suggested a participation requirement. The idea is that if one isn't employed, then the individual will be required to volunteer goodwill hours to qualify for the basic income. Of course, a participation requirement runs counter to the lack of conditionality precept of UBI. Then there are questions: who decides what is enough participation, and how is that going to be monitored? If you'll recall, modality dealt with the logistical issues of disbursement of payment. In a 2007 paper, De Whisperele and Sturton argued that any income maintenance scheme must perform 3 essential administrative tasks. These are: 1. Standards and rules must be enacted which establish operational criteria that define intended beneficiaries. 2. Information must be gathered and maintained so that those who satisfy eligibility conditions can be identified and properly distinguished from those who are not eligible. And 3. Payment must be dispersed to those identified as proper beneficiaries of a grant and only to those who are identified. These complexities would take hours to cover in discussion. In fact, most of what I've found in the academic literature examines these complexities, though solutions are rarely offered. In the UK, for example, it is estimated that in 2007, some 690,000 households comprising of almost 900,000 individuals had no access to a basic transactional bank account. How do you disperse to those you can't reach? When you think about the logistics and administration of a UBI, think about the dynamics of people reaching eligible age and people dying. These things happen every minute of every day. And how would such a system handle people moving countries or simply moving states where cost of living differences necessitate differing levels of basic income? And who gets to determine at what level cost of living differences are considered, and thus what is adequate in terms of basic compensation? Here's one. If individuality is defined at the household level rather than the individual level, then who keeps track of multi-generational households, which are also always in a very fluid state? In reality, where UBI has been tried thus far, outside of the 2 cases of Alaska and Iran, it's really nothing more than a glorified welfare system. Rather than everyone getting a base stipend regardless of income, it ends up being a progressively taxed wealth redistribution scheme. Finland has tried it, but only for a small group of unemployed workers. Scotland is talking about trying it. The UK also discussed it, but scrapped the idea because of the expected cost of administering such a program. And Switzerland voters flat out rejected UBI when it was put on their ballot. And these are countries that are already some of the more liberal when it comes to social programs and tax structures. For the sake of time here, I'm going to save my discussion of taxation by the Scandinavian countries for my last video. But suffice it to say that all of that social goodwill comes at a price, and not just on the group that the Sandroids or Bernie brats or whatever you wish to call them thinks bears the brunt of the tax burden. Also in my last video, even though I'm in no way a proponent of UBI, I'm going to lay out a case whereby I think the concept could work, but it's a radical concept that would never be permitted by a power-craving government such as ours. But hey, it's a thought. So until next time, so long,